Hello, I'm Amanda, and I'm here today to talk about the top 10 project risks and how to mitigate them. But first of all, a little bit about me. I'm a Salesforce MVP. I'm one of the co-leaders of the London Admins Group. I'm a co-organiser of London's Calling. I'm also a triple ranger. I'm 5-time certified, and I'm also the author of Diary of a Sassy Girl. So today I'm going to cover the following things: a definition of a risk, what a RAID log is, I'm then going to race through the top 10 countdown, and then we're going to summarise at the end. So let's start. So I come from a project management background, and I actually studied Prince 2. So I got my Prince 2 book and had a look at a definition of a risk. And it goes like this. It's an uncertain event or set of events that, should it occur, will have an effect on the achievement of objectives. A risk is measured by a combination of the probability of a perceived threat or opportunity occurring and the magnitude of its impact on objectives. So when it comes to actually projects, a lot of the time you might be identifying some risks prior to the start of one, and you'll certainly identify risks during one. And risks can end up delaying the delivery of a project. But interesting, according to Prince 2, it also could up opportunities to deliver something differently. So when you do identify a risk, you'll put them into a risk register, as Prince 2 would call them, but more modern day we would now call it a RAID log. A RAID log actually represents risks, assumptions, issues and dependencies. I personally also like to add another spreadsheet to that and actually capture all the decisions too, but well, that's another talk. Anyway, back to the RAID log. With a RAID log, you'll capture what that issue is. You'll also identify who the owner is who's trying to mitigate it. You'll capture when it happened and also its status, whether you have resolved it, whether you accept it, or whether it's ongoing. But ultimately, you need to mitigate whatever risks you are identifying. However, there are some risks that you might not want to put onto a RAID log at all. These risks might be contentious or a little bit too political, and certainly not ones that you want to put into the public eye. These are the risks that I'm going to be talking about today in this top 10. So let's get started. Hold on to your hats. This is going to be a quick fire round. Coming in at number 10. Well, here we are. We're starting off with the too good to be true sales pitch. I don't know about you, but I've seen a few times whereby the salesperson is trying to promote a solution to a problem and saying it's all standard config, but actually it's a lot of custom development. It ends up being very complex and very time consuming. They underestimate the true cost of delivery. But they do this in order to have competitive pricing so that they get selected and maybe not another party. What happens is that you end up over-promising and possibly over and under-delivering. What can you do about it? Well, here's some mitigation tactics for you. First of all, can you be part of the pre-sales team? If you can, then you can work alongside the salesperson and the customer and establish the art of the possible and not the impossible. If you are not on the actual team, then but part on the project, make sure you read carefully that statement of works. Make sure you understand what exactly has been promised. And then make sure that your customer has read the statement of works, that they understand the terms that are being placed there so that you can keep their expectations in check. That's often where things can go a little bit awry. If you do have a project which is looking a little bit tight on resources, then you do need to manage those and maybe escalate that internally. Can you get some other resource that you can borrow in order to resolve the project? And if you can't, then you've got to go to resolve to the idea of change requests, where you go back to the client and say, look, in order to deliver this, then I need X more time. Can you sign it off and get some more budget on board? Coming in at number 9, and at number 9 we have champagne tastes and beer budget. This is where a customer might think about their license purchase and initial implementation, but forget about the fact that there might be more coming. You see, an adopting system only really works when it works alongside the business changes, because you then add enhancements to that. Now, if you don't have the budget to do that, then things go awry, business moves on and the system stays still. There are some customers also who think that they can implement Salesforce themselves, but that can be costly over time, because while Salesforce is incredibly configurable, if your processes are complex, you might not be able to do it justice. And then there are some clients who just have those expectations where they want the moon on a stick. Well, Sometimes all they can get is the stick. What can you do? Well, here's some options for you straight away. Talk with the client and get them to think of this as a long-term investment. They need to look beyond that initial purchase and initial implementation. And with doing so, they might want to think about getting on board a team to help them with those future enhancements and build up a centre of excellence. That also might be the idea of capturing new requirements, building a roadmap, building in iterations. Because when you build in iterations as well, that also might help your budget, because you can turn back to your internal stakeholders and say, we will build this at this point and we'll build that one in the future. That means they might be able to get more budget to help with those needs. Here we have the magic 8 ball. And at number 8, we have toxic team members. It's quite interesting to see how some people's behaviour can threaten the success of a project. Now, nobody does this maliciously most of the time, but it does actually cause a lot of pain for people. Here's some examples. You could have the architect who doesn't have enough experience of the platform, who doesn't design something that is future-proof or scalable. You could have the developer who is wanting to progress with their career and wants to use this particular project as a case study and over-engineers the solution when actually something could be very configurable. There could be the team member who doesn't communicate at stand-ups, therefore you don't know what's going on. And there could be some person in meetings who doesn't let the other person speak or give their opinion. It's all them. So what happens? Well, if you identify these traits and what's happening with other team members, then you really have to act immediately. You have to stop that toxic behaviour, because their behaviour will influence other people's behaviour as well. And it could really send the project downwards. You must investigate the cause. Why is this happening? It could be that the person is feeling overwhelmed, or the person wants to progress but doesn't quite know how to do it. Or the person might be fearful of somebody else, and therefore their behaviour is being triggered by someone else's behaviour. Is there more toxicity in there? Once you've identified it and maybe helped them through some suggestions, then give them time to change their behaviour and hopefully get back into alignment with the rest of the team and to be able to progress. But unfortunately, if that behaviour doesn't get aligned, then you have to think about maybe removing them and remove that toxicity. Because you have to consider the long-term harmony and success of a project. Number 7. And at number 7, we have got collaborate or die. Now, this is leading on from that toxic team members and adding some more here as well. Now, you could have some person here who's failing to turn up for meetings and give their update. You could have someone who's failing to deliver their work to their timescales. You could have somebody who is failing to update their tickets for progress. Really not helpful. It slows the whole project down where you just don't know what's going on. But it also can happen on client side too. On client side, if they don't bring the right people on board into the project and be able to give their opinion or to give them the access to information, then you don't know whether what you're building is going to be suitable, and therefore it might not be adopted in the long run. Then there's also technology. See, we work with lots of technology and lots of apps and we integrate, but if one particular app doesn't integrate very well, then it can really slow down a project because it might not be scalable or future-proof and literally blow up systems. So what can you do? So here's some mitigation tactics for you. When it comes to that individual member again with that toxicity, they might be overwhelmed. So give them some support. It's again listening to them. They might be able to change their behaviours. There could be a confidence issue. There could be some deadline issues. There could just be some, problems. So help them and support them get over that. When it comes to the client and stakeholders, escalate in order to get the right people on board. Find out why are the right voices there. Get them in the room. And when it comes to technology, well, review and test the capabilities of any third-party apps that are coming in way before you consider committing to any integration. Make sure you do it in a sandbox. We are trying to protect production after all. You certainly don't want to be overloading the system at any point. And now at number 6. And number 6 comes dirty data. Now, it's interesting that when it comes to a project, data should be one of the first things that you consider, but interestingly, it's coming in at number 6, which makes you wonder what's coming down the line here if this is number 6, and this is quite important. It's interesting to see a lot of customers will get into a sort of panicked position and when it comes to projects, and they kind of run out of time to review the existing data, what they've currently got stuck in silo systems. And they get to a point where they just go, oh, look, you know what, we'll just push it into the new world, it'll be fine. However, if you're pushing in dirty data like that, what's happening is that you're pushing in old processes without thinking about why you're doing it. You're encouraging those poor behaviours that you've got in old world and just pushing it into that new world as well. Not great. You need to think about the type of data you've got and how you capture it and when you capture it and why you capture it, because those all drive those business processes. And if you just lift and shift old world in, well, then you're potentially causing poor adoption in the future system as well. So how to mitigate that? When it comes to new systems, shake out and think about those new processes when it comes to data capture. Then go and review your existing data. Are there duplications? Is it in the right format? Does it look pretty rubbish? If so, tidy it up, clean it, get rid of those duplications, make it pleasant for the new person to be seeing in the new world. And certainly whilst you're there, define some quality rules so that any new data that you're capturing is made into a nice format. Oh, and maybe observe some data protection laws whilst you're there at the same time. That'd be handy. Number 5. And in at number 5, we have roadmap to nowhere. I had one customer who had this consideration that they had one shot in order to capture all the requirements that they thought they needed. And so they asked for the world. It meant that they didn't think about their processes. They literally just went, oh, I just want to take this old world and old system and put it into my new world without thinking about why they did certain things. Whilst they were doing that, they were hogging the team. And it meant that other departments didn't have an eye in wanting to get their enhancements done at all. It meant that there was an imbalance of resources being used. All their time and energy was being put into one part of the business without thinking about, well, what do other people need as well? Of course, when you're just trying to drag old world in and shove it into a new world, you're not thinking about the new features that might be available to a new system. Ultimately, if you have no plan, then there's chaos. So, how can you help? Well, simple as create a roadmap, but also keep it very simple as well. So, capture what features should be captured, when are you going to do it, by whom, and when, and stage a little map there. Share it so other people will know what's happening and therefore they can plan as well their resources and their teams. Nowadays we have systems that are integrated, and so with an integrated system there's a team behind that too. Make sure they're going to be available when you have your plan to do that feature so that everything all ties in. But with all businesses comes different changes of priorities, and as their priorities change, well, maybe that roadmap will need to be changed as well. So regularly update it and review it and keep in touch with your stakeholder group with their engagement to make sure you're on the right track too. Number 4. Number 4 is not ready for change. I've spoken about already some businesses who will just try and lift and shift their old world into a new world because that's what they're used to. They're comfortable, the scenario here. This is classic traits of poor change management. They aren't open to the idea of doing something different because they haven't been given that permission to experiment. They have the default of keeping the status quo because that's what they're comfortable with. And sometimes if you have a change, well, sometimes that change just isn't bold enough. It's not going to go far enough to actually achieve what you're wanting to do because they go a little bit too narrow. And they don't think that even with iterations, you'll get far enough. So, explain the why. Why are you doing this? Why is it that, what is the goal of the project? It could be economic. There could be competitors at your heels trying to take market share. So if you don't change your processes or streamline, then they're going to get you. There could be legacy systems that are creaking and needing upgrades or moving away from because they're just going to break. Once you've explained the why and hopefully got those people on board, then communicate the process of how you're going to do it. A lot of people get concerned at this point. They're the ones who will be fearing about their jobs potentially. And in fairness, sometimes those jobs might go because you are changing those processes, making things more efficient, becoming more up to date. But you need to be able to communicate that, in a good way to help those people along. And whilst you're making those changes, elicit feedback, because you need to make sure that what you're doing is going to get adopted and people are going to be okay with it, the ones who are going to keep their jobs anyway, but that you're actually going to keep on track with the project and delivering the ultimate goal. Number 3. And then number 3 are people on the bus. And when I mean people on the bus, I'm referring to stakeholders in a project. These are the people who will be driving the change, but also affected by the change as well. These could be the management who initiates the project in the first place. It could be the end users who are going to be using the system. It also could be your customers who will be impacted by the end result as well. How many times have you been on a project that hasn't just got the right combination of stakeholders involved? I've seen many times where management will make decisions and assumptions about processes, but actually are far too distant away from the actual day-to-day of the job. The assumptions that they make sometimes can be wrong, and therefore you can build up functionality that won't get adopted because, well, we don't do it like that. Then if you do get the right people on board and team members, then they might see their workload double because they're there because they've got a day job. And suddenly they've got lots and lots of project commitments. If you don't look after them, then potentially they're going to get very stressed and maybe leave. And that's a whole load of knowledge out the door, which you don't want. There also might be the wider stakeholder unit as well, who may not be directly involved in the project, but they could be concerned about those impacts because let's face it, they're going on their own personal change curve through this. What will happen to my job, for example? So how do you help them? So let's make sure we get the right people on board. Escalate if you need to. Make sure those key groups are represented, that they are making informed decisions and that some people are not making assumptions on their behalves. Then if you have got those people, then you might need to backfill their day job, especially if they are critical people who are going to be working an awful lot on those projects. You also might need to backfill before you start the project as well, so that the person can deliver that part and then have their mind clear for the project. And then when it comes to communication, think about the different types of communication you're going to be delivering. If you're in the core team, you might be having daily stand-ups and lots of regular updates. If you are on the end user team, then you might be getting some show and tells and some features of what's coming, little videos or whatever. Then there is the wider audience, maybe your customers. They might need communications too, because the way that you deal with them in the future may change. So be mindful of what you're going to be delivering. In at number 2. And at number 2 is the VIP. And when I mean VIP, I'm talking about your customer, because how many times do you forget about your customer? Often when it comes to projects, they might not be bold enough with goals. They might be afraid of just changing enough. And therefore, they end up just tweaking a little bit. I've seen too many times where customers have too many products, too many confusing different products, or too many confusing and complex processes. They're trying to wedge all of this change into the new world without thinking bold enough about that. And certainly not thinking about their own customer, about what do the customer actually need to do in order to get that deal. They don't go deep enough when it comes into capturing requirements and thinking about the customer journey, and maybe you could do it differently, smoother. There are also some in departments who might be a little bit greedy when it comes to data capture. They might want to try and capture everything, but then do they need to? And then there are those who just think a little bit too short-termist when it comes to the customer relationship. They want to hit targets, so they want to get to the deal as quick as possible without actually thinking, what does the customer really need? So when it comes to your customer, simplify your offering. Yes, you want them to get to yes and get them to sign that deal, but you want to make sure that it is the right product for them and an easy process for them to define, so they don't have to have the complexity of it all, so they're happy to sign and to maybe rebook again in the future. Think about the data that you're capturing on them and why are you keeping it as well. Do you need it? When does a customer feel comfortable that you've got their data? And overall, maintain and build a relationship with your customer. Think about the long-term investment potential that you'll have with them. The repeat business is really important. And at number 1. Number 1 here is the biggest risk at all. These are leadership, these are executives, project sponsors. It is trouble at the top. These people here, if they are not aligned to the project goal and that they have different targets to hit and conflicts of interest, these are the ones who can really slow a project down or even kill it. You have to think about why they are doing it in the first place. There are some who might be a command and control leader who are turning around and prescribing, we are going to deliver it in a certain way and absolutely we're not going to change from this. There could be pride issues at stake here, especially if things aren't going well with a project, but they absolutely want to keep on that line. So when it comes to trouble at the top, what do? Well, if there is information that you do need to share with them, that there's stuff that's not going right, then stick to the facts. And try and show where the problem is. Remove any emotion from it, remove any blame, and protect people's egos. They're doing it for the greater good, but they might be going down the wrong way. Just try and keep them on the right direction. If, however, your information is not getting through, those communications aren't working, then find some allies. Someone who also shares your opinion, who also wants to be able to help to get the project back on track again. And so they might be able to escalate that and be able to be heard. But thing is though, if you're not feeling supported, if you don't feel that you're progressing and you aren't able to challenge, then you might need to protect yourself. And if so, then you might need to be prepared to walk away from a project. At the end of the day, no project is worth you risking your health and your well-being. So consider that. In summary, let's have a recap of the top 10. At number 10, we started off with the too good to be true sales pitch, whereby you really do need to be there in order to maintain client expectations and keep the project true. And then number 9 was champagne tastes and beer budget. You can achieve an awful lot. Just make sure that they have a bit of a plan here and what is possible. And then number 8, toxic team members. People aren't malicious, they just end up doing behaviours that could affect a project. Find out and then support them and try and make that change. Then comes number 7, collaborate or die. An extension on the toxic team members, but there are also customers who may not be helping the project, and there's technology that also might be clashing. Identify them, mitigate them quickly. Number 6 came dirty data. Don't lift and shift old world. Make sure that you are reviewing things, cleaning it up and having a policy in place. Then roadmap to nowhere. Well, simple as have a plan, keep it simple, keep reviewing it and keep delivering, and think about all your stakeholders. And number 4 comes ready for change. You need to be open to the concept of changing and be bold with those changes as well. Give people permission to experiment. Number 3, people on the bus. These are stakeholders. Don't make assumptions, get the right voices there so they can make the right decisions and be able to move forward with the project so that it can be adopted in the future. Number 2 is the VIP. It's your customer. This is why you're doing it, in order to engage with your customer and to keep your relationships strong. Keep them in your mind. And at number 1, trouble at the top. Let those egos at the door. Think about why you're doing this. Keep to the project goal, communicate and collaborate. That will help leadership, please. That'll be great. But as you can notice from our top 10 here, not all of these would you want to be on a raid log. They are contentious, they are political. A lot of them are people orientated too, which makes you wonder when it comes to projects, it isn't just about technology. In fact, more of it is about processes and behaviors before you even touch technology. So maybe you might want to challenge the need for the change in the first place, and maybe look at the human behavior first and whether that could be changed to be an effective moment before thinking about technology. But whatever you do with projects, start simply and iterate to expand. Identify your risks along the way and mitigate them as early as possible. Good luck. Thank you.